At 26 years old, I've been married to my 29-year-old husband for almost 3 years. Throughout this time, it's been apparent that my in-laws, including my husband's two 23-year-old twin sisters and his 21-year-old brother, haven't warmed up to me. Even my mother-in-law seems distant. I've always tried to bridge this gap, despite not understanding why they seem to harbor negative feelings toward me. Recently, I took it upon myself to plan my mother-in-law's 50th birthday party. Despite my husband's warning that his family might not appreciate my efforts, I was determined to mend the relationship. I'm someone who values connections, and the idea that these people didn't like me for no clear reason troubled me deeply. I meticulously organized the celebration at my mother-in-law's favorite restaurant, where she and her late husband frequented. I handled all the arrangements, from the food to the decorations, ensuring everything aligned with her preferences. Despite trying to involve my husband's siblings, they showed no interest and left the entire planning on my shoulders, even refusing to contribute financially. When the day arrived, my husband and I visited his mother to extend the invitation. To my surprise, his siblings were already there, appearing startled by our presence. After some small talk, I disclosed the plans for her celebration. When my husband acknowledged that it was my effort, not his, she suddenly became cold, souring the atmosphere. Confused, I detailed how I had meticulously arranged the event, hoping she would appreciate my gesture. Instead, she delivered a falsely sweet thank you before informing me that I wouldn't be attending. Shocked, I asked her why. When I asked why, she explained that she wanted her 50th to be an intimate family affair, extending that designation only to relatives, not me. She essentially asked me to keep away. My husband and I were stunned, and in that moment, I realized he had been right all along. She was never going to appreciate any effort I put forth. The smirk on my in-laws' faces infuriated me further. I couldn't contain my frustration. I stood up and bluntly told her to go to hell, warning her that if she showed up the next day, I'd have security remove her. That wiped the smugness off their faces. She accused me of being cold and cruel, but I just laughed in response. I was fed up and made it clear that my decision was final. Her attempts to make me feel guilty by crying fell on deaf ears. I was too enraged to care. On the drive home, I tried to cancel the reservation, but it was too late. My husband seemed uncomfortable, choosing not to comment much except for saying I did the right thing before stepping out for a smoke. He's never been one to delve into family conflicts, and I appreciated him not making me feel worse about ignoring his advice. Since I'd already paid for everything, I canceled the last-minute invites, irking some of my mother-in-law's friends. Instead, I called upon my own friends to salvage the situation and make the evening enjoyable. My husband and I invited some of his friends too, deciding to turn the occasion into our own celebration. We hastily removed the decorations before they arrived and ended up having an absolute blast. I uploaded all the pictures when I returned home today. My sister-in-law texted me, upset that I repurposed the venue for my own use after canceling my mother-in-law's birthday party. She accused me of selfishness, highlighting how much the place meant to my mother-in-law. I don't feel overwhelmingly remorseful about my actions, believing my decision was justified, but I'm unsure if I made the right call. Am I the antagonist for canceling the party after being told I wasn't welcome there? Update. I shared the message from my sister-in-law with my husband and asked if I should apologize to his family. Surprisingly, he staunchly advised against it. In fact, he suggested cutting ties entirely, a significant step considering his family often relied on him, especially financially. He's successful and runs his own company, so withdrawing support meant his mother would have to rely on his less dependable siblings, who frequently changed jobs and leaned on him for money. I tried dissuading him from this drastic action, sensing there might be more behind his decision. Over time, I noticed his family growing distant from him, even during our dating phase. Despite his efforts to invite them over for dinner, they always found excuses to avoid it. I felt partly responsible, fueling my eagerness to build a connection with my in-laws, hoping it would help my husband reconnect with his family. There seems to be something deeper my husband hasn't shared. He's not the type to abandon family. Earlier, he emphasized the importance of family, making this sudden decision, while understandable given my recent treatment by my mother-in-law, highly uncharacteristic for him. I'm determined to understand the situation fully. I don't want him to be unhappy or resentful toward me in the future. I'm really hoping that he'll finally feel comfortable enough to open up and share what led him to take such a drastic step. Now, for the second update. After persistently urging him, my husband finally unveiled why he's decided to sever ties with his family after all these years. When he was 21, his father passed away, leaving his mother, who had never worked, and his siblings, who were all in school, dependent on him. With the inheritance his father left, it wasn't enough to sustain them, so he took on the responsibility of becoming the family's breadwinner. He toiled tirelessly day and night until around 23 when he secured investors for his startup. His success propelled him from just scraping by to thriving financially. However, his family began to grow lazy and materialistic, heavily relying on his newfound success. Despite feeling obliged to support them in his father's absence, he noticed their dependency increasing. Additionally, they treated his past girlfriends poorly, convinced that outsiders would distract him from his familial duties. When they realized I wasn't going to be driven away so easily, their annoyance grew, and they attempted to poison my husband against me. This led to clandestine fights and arguments during our dating period, where his family pushed him to end our relationship. But he remained resolute about marrying me. As time passed, they resorted to emotional manipulation. Even after years of trying to separate us, they continued to ask him for money. When the birthday incident occurred, his sister attempted to guilt-trip me, while his mother called him to emotionally manipulate him into leaving me due to the perceived insult. Learning about this, my husband reached his breaking point. He realized it was time to let go. I'm still in disbelief at how his family put him through all this, despite him being the sole support for years. My respect for them has evaporated due to their sheer greed. I'm grateful I stood by my husband despite their efforts to break us apart and exploit him for money. I couldn't care less about his financial status. My love for him stems from who he is, not his bank balance. Knowing the entire story now, I'm astounded he endured this and kept it hidden from me for so long, trying to shield my feelings. I had hoped for a positive connection with my in-laws, but he understood it was an unrealistic expectation. I believe he's making the right call now. His family deserves to be cut off for their incredible selfishness, greed, and lack of respect for the man who supported them against all odds. In today's update, my husband finally made the call to his mother, informing her that unless they change their ways, he doesn't want to hear from her or his siblings. They'll need to find their own means of income as he won't support them indefinitely, as I had anticipated. Predictably, their reaction was explosive. Even without the phone on loudspeaker, I could hear my mother-in-law screaming at my husband. Their argument echoed through the room, as I was present while my husband conversed. Predictably, my mother-in-law attempted to shift blame onto me, accusing me of influencing his decision to sever ties and disrupt their family. She even asserted that my husband shouldn't allow himself to be swayed by his wife, which struck me as ironic coming from her. My husband defended me vehemently, emphasizing that his siblings, as adults, need to secure stable employment instead of relying on him. She resorted to accusing him of letting wealth and influence get to his head, insinuating that I might be the one manipulating him into cutting ties. It was a classic tactic: manipulation and emotional blackmail to maintain control over him. However, I refused to let this manipulation continue. Seeing my husband growing visibly distressed and teary-eyed due to their tactics was difficult. As things intensified, I realized the depth of what she and her other children had been doing. I couldn't stand seeing my husband so distraught. I chose to step in and address the situation. I firmly informed my mother-in-law that my husband had made his decision. If she and her children didn't align with our expectations soon, they risked losing his support indefinitely. The choice was theirs: respect us and remain in our lives, or persist in their materialistic and selfish ways and be cut off completely. After asserting this, I hung up, muted notifications on my husband's phone to grant him a break from their messages, and allowed him time to calm down. We put our phones aside to watch a movie and distract ourselves. In the next update, after enduring harassment, my mother-in-law turned her attention to me. Following the movie, my husband resumed some pending work, and as I checked my phone, I found numerous missed calls and offensive texts from my in-laws. I anticipated this behavior and documented their messages without engaging. While handling work emails, my mother-in-law called again. Accidentally answering, she proceeded to hurl insults at me, making baseless accusations about my character and intentions towards my husband. I chose not to react and simply stated that her accusations reflected her own actions. I expressed satisfaction that my husband was finally liberating himself from freeloaders like them. Subsequently, I blocked my mother-in-law and his siblings on all possible platforms to halt their harassment. It's disheartening how low some people stoop to evade responsibility. I refrained from telling my husband about his mother's call to avoid causing him further stress, but I'm prepared to involve him if their harassment continues. They have no right to disturb our peace. Nearly 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law, accompanied by her children, arrived at our doorstep demanding an explanation for our actions. Despite protests that I wasn't family and shouldn't be present, I stood my ground, reminding them they were intruding under our roof and had no authority to dictate my presence. I was caught in a difficult situation when my husband's family showed up, bombarding him with accusations and insults. Seeing my husband's distress, I stepped in. Knowing his gentle nature, I knew he wouldn't defend himself against their manipulative claims. I urged him to compose himself while I confronted his family. They launched into a tirade, accusing my husband of abandoning them for my sake and claiming he was neglecting his familial duties just to please his wife. Their words were a storm of accusation and disrespect. I couldn't stand by as they berated my husband, accusing me of being a gold digger and him of being selfish. My patience snapped. I lashed out, calling them out for being lazy and incapable, surviving on my husband's generosity while offering nothing in return. They were stunned into silence, unable to counter my accusations. Taking advantage of their momentary shock, I demanded they leave before I involved the authorities for trespassing. They departed, but my mother-in-law persisted, emotionally manipulating my husband by implying his deceased father would be disappointed in his actions. Witnessing his emotional breakdown after they left, I spent hours consoling him, feeling regret for ever attempting to mend our relationship with them. After their departure, I ensured they had no way to contact us and suggested we seek legal advice, knowing they might continue their harassment. Sadly, my prediction was accurate. Within days, my mother-in-law sent a legal notice, falsely claiming my husband had embezzled funds from the family estate to start his business. This false allegation tarnished his reputation and affected his company. However, we fought back. It took nearly 2 weeks, but we disproved their lies. They were found guilty of defamation, resulting in a hefty fine against them. The rest of the family distanced themselves from their deceitful actions, and my in-laws, previously reliant on my husband's support, now scrambled to find jobs to sustain themselves. This episode, while challenging, allowed us to break free from their toxic grip. My husband and I are happier without their influence, and I'm determined to keep it that way. We're moving forward, leaving their drama behind. Hello, I am a single woman in my 60s. Since childhood, I held on to the belief in a reciprocal philosophy, thinking that my hard work and dedication would be met with equal effort in return. This mindset extended to my relationships, where I believed treating others kindly would result in receiving kindness in return. Even after marriage, I continued to hold this belief, assuming that by being considerate to my husband, he would reciprocate. In today's world, women aren't expected to sacrifice as much. But during my era, societal expectations were different. I willingly made sacrifices for my husband and children. confident that my efforts would contribute to future happiness. However, my marriage and family life didn't unfold as expected. Despite my early mornings and diligent work for the family, complaints and mistakes overshadowed appreciation. At that time, no one mandated that I live this way. I was an ordinary person who married a coworker 4 years my senior due to societal expectations. Despite the societal norms for married women to quit their jobs, I became a full-time housewife after giving birth to my daughter. I had no regrets. I believed it was a natural course of action for family life. Though my life wasn't glamorous like TV dramas, it felt easy and stable. Around my daughter's 9th grade, tragedy struck when my mother passed away suddenly from a heart attack. While mourning her loss, I discovered my husband's affair. In the midst of my grief, he found joy elsewhere, becoming uncaring and eventually demanding a divorce. Despite my determination to avoid divorce, my husband's behavior became unbearable. Divorce wasn't as socially acceptable back then, and despite an irresponsible and unkind husband, I resisted the idea. Looking back, I realized my naivety, but more was at stake. My daughter, witnessing the turmoil, felt the impact. Despite my refusal to divorce, I found myself in a deeply miserable situation. During a heated argument about our impending divorce, my father unexpectedly visited. Witnessing the distress in our relationship, he offered me a place to live and encouraged me to leave my husband, taking my daughter with me. Having recently lost his wife and observed his daughter in an unhappy marriage, my father convinced me that persisting in such a difficult situation was futile. Feeling the weight of his concern, I yielded to my husband's request for a divorce. In return, my husband provided me with $3,000 in cash. With my father's support, I secured a 2-bedroom townhouse to live in with my daughter, starting anew. I anticipated the need to work hard to support my daughter, fearing judgment from society for being a divorced woman with a daughter. This concern was particularly heightened as my daughter entered adolescence. During this challenging period, my daughter expressed typical desires of her age, lamenting the perceived consequences of her parents' divorce. Despite the emotional hurt, I knew I couldn't dwell on them forever, determined to provide for my daughter. I embarked on the journey of seeking stable employment. However, being an older divorced woman with a child made securing a job challenging. Undeterred, I took on multiple part-time and nighttime jobs, even engaging in freelance work at home whenever possible. As time passed, my daughter advanced to her senior year of high school. Despite financial constraints, she excelled academically, finding her own way to thrive. Motivated by my desire to ensure her future, I secured a job at a 24-hour restaurant, working 12-hour shifts. 2/3 of my earnings were diligently saved for her college tuition. Despite facing judgment and gossip, especially from some married men who viewed me as an easy target, I persevered for the sake of my daughter. The sacrifices were numerous, but my goal was to provide her with opportunities I never had. As she approached adulthood, I hoped she would understand the struggles I faced in raising her and making a living. Reflecting on these challenges, I realized that having a daughter made my situation both more arduous and meaningful. She became my anchor, giving me the strength to endure and persevere through life's challenges. I held on to the belief that, in the future, my grown daughter and I would share stories about the hardships we faced and take pride in our resilience. A year later, my daughter's outstanding performance in the SAT exams earned her admission to Harvard University, a moment of immense joy that made all the previous struggles worthwhile. As she embarked on her college journey, I felt a mix of pride and emptiness. Though I had managed to provide for her education and housing, the absence of her daily presence at home left a void. We maintained close contact through phone calls, and during the initial months of her independence, our bond deepened. Her newfound affection and connection were a source of comfort, and I cherished our evolving relationship. Despite the challenges, my daughter graduated from college without financial setbacks, fulfilling a dream we had worked hard to achieve. Anticipating that we could live together again, I was surprised when she secured a job at a defense corporation and chose to live independently. To support her, I took a bank loan and contributed to the down payment for a condo near her workplace. While I aged and embraced a more unassuming appearance, my daughter thrived as a fashionable career woman. Witnessing her success brought immense happiness, reinforcing the idea that my sacrifices had borne fruit. I found contentment in her achievements, understanding the sentiment of people who say they forget hunger in moments of joy. Despite the financial support throughout her college years, the prospect of her wedding became a new financial responsibility. People questioned why I continued to struggle when my daughter was capable of self-sufficiency. However, I was determined to contribute to her wedding expenses to prevent any condescension from her future in-laws. The belief that sacrificing for her happiness would bring joy to both of us fueled my resilience. On the other hand, as my daughter dated, I noticed a growing distance between us. Initially hurt, I recognized that her adult life and relationships rightfully took precedence. I patiently waited for her to mature and open up to me, understanding that priorities shift during this phase of life. However, on her 27th birthday, I looked forward to celebrating with her. Yet she made it clear that she had plans with someone named Michael and dismissed any preparations. While she may have intended to convey that I needn't go to any trouble, I couldn't help but feel hurt. It was her birthday, a day that held immense significance for me as the day she was born, and her apparent indifference stung deeply. It was challenging to comprehend why my daughter considered spending money on her birthday a waste, given the tight budget. Despite her intelligence, her understanding of her own mother seemed distant. Despite my hurt feelings, I understood she was my only daughter, and I wanted to see her briefly on her birthday, even if it meant taking a day off work. On that day, I meticulously paid attention to my appearance before going to her workplace. However, what awaited me was an unexpected and emotionally charged encounter in the company lobby. I saw my ex-husband with his mistress, individuals I never wished to see again. Doubting how he found out and came there, I frantically called my daughter, only to be abruptly hung up on as she claimed to be busy with a meeting. Feeling dumbfounded, I turned around, only to hear my daughter happily calling her dad and embracing him with a bright smile. Her boyfriend seemed familiar with my ex-husband and his wife, adding to my fury. In that moment, I felt betrayed, as if the whole world conspired against me. Drained of meaning, I hastily left the scene. Reflecting on that day, I felt the desire to confront my daughter and ex-husband, but an overwhelming urge to escape prevailed. Despite my inner turmoil, I couldn't muster the courage to call my daughter. Unexpectedly, my daughter showed up at home one day, announcing her decision to get married and handing me an invitation card. The surprise turned into shock when I saw the names on the card. Although she was my daughter, I felt an intense urge to throw her out of the house. I questioned how she, my own daughter, could present such an invitation. I confronted her, expressing my hurt at being treated like a guest at her wedding, emphasizing my role as her mother. In response, my daughter apologized, stating she felt she had no choice. Despite her desire to marry Michael, she faced scrutiny from his parents over every detail about her. The situation left me grappling with complex emotions, torn between hurt and the desire to understand my daughter's perspective on her life-changing decision. The revelation from my daughter about her concerns regarding my divorced past and the challenges of being a single mother struck me deeply. She explained that revealing this truth could jeopardize her chances of marrying her boyfriend, as her potential in-laws might disapprove. In the face of this revelation, I couldn't help but express my frustration, reminding her of the sacrifices and struggles I endured to raise her, work at a restaurant, and fund her education. My daughter's response. However, her response stunned me. She dismissed the past, stating that her father and his new partner, the woman who played a role in breaking our family, had already met with her future in-laws. In her perspective, the present was what mattered most, and she prioritized her desire for a comfortable life over the difficulties we faced before. Feeling hurt and regretful, I spoke harshly to her for the first time in my life, expressing my disappointment in her attitude. In turn, she suggested that if I wanted to drop her from my life, I should repay her for the money I spent raising her. This exchange led to a heated argument, and she left my house in anger, proclaiming that we were now strangers. Devastated by the turn of events, I questioned the purpose of saving money for her wedding and felt a deep sadness when I looked at the wedding invitation she had left behind, with a different name printed where mine should have been. 3 years later, I received news that my father, who had been living independently to avoid burdening me, had fallen ill. Sadly, I learned about his condition only after his passing. The realization of being a poor daughter to him hit me hard. A few months later, I inherited a small condo where he had lived, a bittersweet reminder of the family ties and struggles that shaped my life. Upon realizing that I had money saved from my daughter's wedding in the savings account, I decided it was time to live for myself, even if it seemed somewhat late in life. I pondered the idea that in today's world, trusting only one child and sacrificing for them might not be the most fulfilling path. It was a realization that I should prioritize my own desires and needs before it became too late for me to enjoy life. As I contemplated this shift in perspective, a real estate broker and close friend from the restaurant where I worked suggested that I consider what I truly wanted to do. Despite societal expectations for women to sacrifice, I felt the desire to break free from that mold and live for myself. I harbored a feeling of regret and sorrow for the sacrifices I made over the years, and I yearned to pursue personal fulfillment. Inspired by my friend, I embarked on studying the real estate business and even delved into auction biddings. With some savings and money from selling my late father's condo, I seized the opportunity to take on a new challenge. In the surprising turn of events, I became a building owner overnight, residing in a prime location. 6 months later, after returning from a mountain climbing adventure, I found myself on the top floor of my building, now transformed into my home. Unexpectedly, someone knocked on my door, and I debated whether to pretend not to be home due to fatigue. However, curiosity prevailed, and I opened the door to find my pregnant daughter with a chubby-cheeked toddler in her arms. Tearful and distressed, she explained that she had been deceived by her husband, who turned violent and had affairs. Faced with impending childbirth and raising her young daughter, she sought refuge with me, despite my initial shock and the lingering hurt from our previous arguments. I couldn't turn my back on my daughter in need. She revealed that she had heard about my newfound success in real estate and wanted assistance. Despite the painful history between us, she pleaded for help, pointing out that she had a share in the money I had acquired from my wedding savings and inheritance. Caught between anger and compassion, I couldn't deny my daughter's plea for help. Despite her past actions, I recognized the vulnerability in her situation and knew that as a mother, I couldn't turn her away. The complexities of our relationship resurfaced, prompting me to grapple with the tangled emotions of love, disappointment, and the inevitability of family ties. I confronted her, saying, "I was the one who saved money for your education and your wedding, but you told me to get out of your life. Do I need to give you money now?" I only said that, but I didn't get any money back from you. It seems that in front of money, there is no use for the bond between a parent and a child. Now that you have money, you don't need a daughter, right? No matter what, I am still your daughter, so I have a right to your money too. I was once very proud of you, thinking that it was because of me that you were able to attend Harvard. But now I see that it was all in vain. I guess I was too busy making a living that I couldn't teach you to be a decent human being. I raised you as someone who is so selfish and can only think of yourself. I don't plan to give you 1 penny, so you can either go back to your husband or your wonderful father. You are too mean. Could you abandon your own daughter? Do you think other people would care for me at all? That wife already ran off with the money, and he has disappeared trying to look for her. If you abandon me, I'll become an orphan. Now I have a child and I'm pregnant, so how could you be so mean to me? Would you be happy if I died like that? When she screamed at me, I couldn't put up with her any longer, so I took out all the money I had in my wallet and threw it at her. Since you are acting so pathetic, I'll give you that. However, never come back to my house because I won't let you in. There's something that I learned in the meantime, just that your life is important. Now my life is important. You cannot put me in and out of your life at your whim. I coldly let my daughter and her child out of my house. Of course, I would not feel good about it since she was my daughter after all. However, I couldn't accept her because she still was as selfish as before, and I couldn't bury the past. However, I felt sorry for my little granddaughter, who was innocent and got kicked out together with her mom. After that, my daughter was too proud and never came to see me again. To be honest, I knew that she was such a daughter. So, has she repented for her past acts and begged me for forgiveness out of a quest? Pretending I was reluctant, but would have found ways to punish her wayward husband. But I was so disappointed that if she erased me from her life to marry her husband, she should have lived happily. Why did my husband and my daughter turn out that way, even though I lived a hard life? Now I see that the only person who is living a life the way I want to is only me alone. Thus, if anyone is living a life like I did on behalf of others, I want to say this one thing for sure. No matter how strong your relationship is with another person, be sure to take care of your life first. Even if everyone in this world betrays you, you will not betray yourself. In the end, happiness is not what you do for others, but what you do for yourself. I want to give that message through my story here. Even though it may seem like a life that's only felt half, I plan to try to fill that remaining half from now on for complete happiness. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope all goes well for you today, and good fortune will be with you. Please cheer for me and write your comments of wisdom in the comment section. Pressing like and subscribing is a big help to me. Have a wonderful day, everyone.